What up, Wizards? It's Dev and the Chicken. We're from Mtg, and the big fluffy day's finally here. It is day one of Bloomburrow preview season, a set that I've been looking forward to for a really long time. Bye, Chicken. Rude. That's fine. I got plenty of little aminals to keep me company today anyway, so let's go ahead and get to it because we got like 50 cards and 5 new mechanics to go through and a returning mechanic. There's just so much to get to, and I am not here to waste time. I'm here to talk about Magic cards, so let's go. I think the most important way to start things off is by looking through all these new mechanics I just mentioned, kind of see what we like, get acclimated, start cooking and all that. And I guess the good news this time around is that all these new mechanics seem fairly simple to me, and that's the kind of Magic I like. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the first card of Bloomburrow preview season. What gets the distinction this time around? It's Veteran Guard Mouse. Now, this is 4 mana, 3 and then a red-white hybrid. You can pay either a red or a white for this in case you're unfamiliar. So 4 mana in all for a 3/4 mouse soldier with Valiant. What does that mean? Whenever Veteran Guard Mouse becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, it gets +1/+0 and gains first strike till end of turn, and you also get to scry 1. So this dude's a pretty easy way to illustrate what exactly Valiant even is in the first place. You know, just target your dudes with your stuff, and cool things will follow from that. In this specific case, you get a guy that's pretty capable of just blowing your opponent out if they block sloppy at the pre-release, so keep that in mind for the limited environment, but I obviously don't see him doing too much in standard. But I got good news on that front. For pretty much all these new mechanics, I'll show you a card or two that's kind of not great. Sorry, buddy. It's kind of where we are with you right now. But there is a card for pretty much all these new mechanics, at least 1 or 2, that I think is actually pretty good. And in this case, it's Seedglaive Mentor. This is 3 mana, 1 a red and a white for a 3/2 mouse soldier with both vigilance and haste. It also has Valiant. So whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability that you control for the first time every turn, this guy gets a +1/+1 counter. Yeah, I actually do think this has a very, very slight chance in standard, mostly because of the mouse creature type and the fact that it's a 3-power haste guy for 3 mana. You could do a lot better than 2 toughness, don't get me wrong, but I will say if you can like throw him down and then combat trick him or target him with like a tap ability on one of your guys like that very same turn, then suddenly a 4/3 haste is like much, much better. But even a 3-power haste guy is pretty intimidating against a lot of opponents like control. You're trying to get under that sunfall, right? You need an aggressive creature in your mouse deck. I think you might reach for this guy. Again, I'm not like overly impressed by this guy or anything, but if you're looking for aggressive Mises, you might just squeak by. But let's move on to the next mechanic that I want to look at. And this one I actually really like the potential of. It's the expend mechanic. Let's take a look at Junkblade Bruiser here. This is 5 mana, 3 and then a red-green hybrid, and another red-green hybrid. It's a 4/5 Raccoon Berserker with Trample. Whenever you expend 4, Bruiser gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Now you expend 4 when you spend your 4th total mana to cast spells during a turn. So I just really like this ability. I don't love this guy very much, but I do like this ability because you're just going to get it. It's like a natural consequence of playing Magic. It's not going to pop off like every single turn because you're not always going to have 4 mana to spend on spells, right? So even if it only happens a couple times in a game, though, it can be a really powerful ability. Like in this case, he's getting kind of a 5 mana 6/6 sometimes, which honestly isn't amazing. It's kind of trash. So let's move on to the next card. Speaking of trash, it's Moira. Trash Tactician, a literal trash panda here. This one is much better in terms of expend cards. 3 mana, 1 a red and a green for a 2/4 legendary Raccoon Warrior. At the beginning of your first main phase, add red or green for each raccoon you control. Whenever you expend 4, you gain 3 life. Whenever you expend 8, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Pretty sweet thing. This is pretty good, I would say. I mean, a 3 mana 2/4 is like, okay, you can't cut it down, you can't bolt it or whatever, so all that's kind of nice. And it's just going to like give you mana every single turn. If you've got a second raccoon out, you get 2 mana every turn. That's really good, actually. But even if it's just the only raccoon you have, you gain 1 mana a turn, which is kind of sweet too. You don't have to tap it to get that mana, it just gives it to you. Pretty cool. And whenever you actually spend enough mana, like gaining life is pretty sweet. I will say too, like if you happen to expend 8 like once or twice in the course of a game, then getting a couple of cards for that is sweet. And getting those couple of cards will help you continue to expend mana on subsequent turns, which I really like about this card too. So sweet little thing right here that I think is on the verge of standard playability, mostly because of the ramp. Up next, we're going to be Foragers though. That's one of my favorite video games of all time. We're going to forage everybody. Let's take a look at this mechanic. Starting with Corpseberry Cultivator. This is 3 mana, 1 and then a black-green hybrid and a black-green hybrid. It's a 2/3 Squirrel Warlock. You gotta love that. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may forage. What does it mean to forage? Oh, you got this reminder text right here, luckily for us. Exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food in order to forage. Whenever you do forage, put a +1/+1 counter on Corpseberry Cultivator. So this card's not super great. You know, I will say it can be a 3 mana 3/4 the turn it comes into play. And the next turn it can be like a 4/5. And that's probably better than it looks, especially for a common in limited at the very least. A cool little card for forage decks. And if there's enough food stuff or ways to fill your graveyard, then again, suddenly like this grows to a 5/6 over the course of a game and your opponent can't ignore it. So I do kind of like it there, but there are much, much better forage options. For instance, let's take looks at Camellia and Osteomancer Adept. That's a name for a card, but Camellia, the Seed Miser. By the way, Camellia is a YouTube DJ that makes like really, really cool remixes of video game songs. Their remix of Megalovania is amazing. So go check out Camellia here on the youtube.com. But still, Camellia, the Seed Miser. This is not some sort of musical artist. Well, I don't know that, but maybe she plays guitar. I don't know. But still, it's 3 mana, 1 a black and a green for a 3/3 legendary Squirrel Warlock with Menace. Other squirrels you control also have Menace. Whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, you get to create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And if you pay 2 and then also forage, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel you control. I am a little disappointed that it doesn't grow to its own forage ability, but I'm just picking nits at this point. You know, you can go nuts with this, especially if you have enough mana and enough cards in your graveyard. I like this forage ability because you don't have to be playing a food deck. You don't have to be playing a self-mill deck. You could be playing one or the other, or you could be playing a little bit of both. We've already seen cards in this set, just from today, that kind of facilitate both strategies. I like that about it, but altogether I think the card's a cool little commander or a good card for the 99 of squirrel decks. I'm not sure how great it's going to be in standard, to be honest. I think that its activated ability costs a little bit too many resources, but all things considered, I think the design on it is really good. But the next couple of cards we're going to look at with Forage, I think might have a space in standard. Now, Osteomancer Adept. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 2/2 Squirrel Warlock with Death Touch. And if you tap it, until end of turn, you may cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter on it. So pretty sweet. If you have 4 cards in your yard and one of them's a creature, you just tap this guy, pay the mana costs, put your guy right into play. Really sweet. Yeah, it gets a finality counter, but like, so who cares? It's really, really sweet. Like black 2-drop right now. And honestly, there is kind of a hole in the black 2-drop spot. We got Deep Cavern Bat, and there are a couple of other decent 2-drops in this color, but we're always looking for good black 2s, and this is a pretty decent one if you can facilitate it, and I think there's plenty of ways of doing so. It's going to be a tough nut to crack, you know? So let's move on to, I think, the best of these cards with Forage, and it's Thorn Vault Forager. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/2 Squirrel Ranger. You can tap it for a green mana. So just a mana dork, right? Well, hold on. You can also tap it in Forage to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Or, there's more, you can pay 3 a green and tap it to search your library for a squirrel card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle it up. So if you are playing squirrels in Commander, I guess this goes and gets like Toski or something. If that's what you want it to do. You know, it gets a bunch of different squirrels if that's what you want it to do. And maybe even in Standard, right? I love that the ability's not at, you know, a sorcery speed ability. You can do it EOT or something like that. That's nice. But altogether, this does tons of stuff. It's just a decent mana dork at sort of the baseline. That's the floor of the card. But if you can ever actually forage, tapping it for 2 mana is extremely powerful. And then, like, yeah, sweet little mana sink here late in the game to make sure that you can keep bodies in your hand and on the board. So altogether, just pretty easily, I think, the best card we saw with Forage today. And even though There's pretty stiff competition at the, mana dork slot in standard right now. Again, definitely has a chance. But let's take a break from all these new mechanics for a second and settle into an old one that most of us know and love. It's Threshold. Threshold is back in the set. It's awesome to see, man. So let's take a look at Mine Drill Assistant. Hey, editing dev flashing in real quick just to say that I totally see that says Assailant now. I don't know why it would be Mine Drill Assistant. I don't know. It's Magic cards. They can say whatever they want. But yeah, that says Assailant. Anyway, I was reading the card. Back to doing that. MDA is 4 mana, 2, and then a blue-black hybrid and a blue-black hybrid for a 2/5 Rat Warlock with Threshold. As long as there are 7 or more cards in your yard, MDA gets +3/+0. You can also pay 2 in a blue-black hybrid to Surveil 1 at instant speed. Pretty sweet, but not a great card. Remember, we're doing a thing here where the first card we look at with a new mechanic or a mechanic at all is just kind of not good. And I think that's what we're looking at here because, I guess it could be a 4 mana 5/5, Juzam Jin's not good anymore? No, it actually kind of hasn't been in a while, So just being Juzam Jin doesn't make you great. And even this activated ability isn't amazing for what you're actually paying for it. So we should probably move on to cards that have Threshold and are actually halfway decent. So let's take a look at Tidecaller Mentor and Shoreline Looter. A Tidecaller Mentor is 3 mana, 1 a black and a blue for a 3/3 Rat Wizard with Menace. It has Threshold. If you have 7 or more things in your yard, you can return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand when Mentor enters. So pretty cool. Mentor enters. It's actually kind of bars, but either way, it's kind of nice. You get a sort of mana war type thing. Although this doesn't only hit creatures, it hits, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever, as long as you have Threshold. But most of the time on curve, it's just going to be like a 3 mana, 3/3 Menace. So again, mostly a limited card, but I do like this ETB trigger whenever I see it. A Shoreline Looter is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 Rat Rogue that cannot be blocked. It also has Threshold. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card and then discard a card unless 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. So you always draw and then discard. You always loot off of this. That's why it's called that. No matter what. But if you have Threshold, it just draws a card. It's really sick. This reminds me of Suspicious Stowaway, which is a card I really like. It's about to rotate out of standard. I'm going to miss it, but I guess now I don't have to miss it as much. It will eventually just flip over into Seafaring Werewolf or whatever it's called, the other half of Suspicious Stowaway, and just start drawing the card, which is pretty sweet. So I like this guy. Don't know how much play he's actually going to see in standard. I'm not sure any of the Threshold cards we've seen so far are super standard playable, but you got to admit these last couple were better than that first card we looked at. Still, this is a cool little guy, and again, it reminds me of a cool little guy I'm going to miss a lot, so I get to like this thing. Now, the next new mechanic that we get to look at as we kind of round the corner on these is Gift, and some of these are pretty decent. I'm not sure we've seen a straight up bad card with this ability just yet, but the first one we look at is Wear Down. This is 1 and a green for a sorcery, and you gift a card. You can promise an opponent a gift as you cast this spell. That seems like unglued reminder text to me, but if you promise an opponent a gift as you cast it, they draw a card before its other effects. At least in this case, you're gifting them a card. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. If a gift was promised, instead destroy 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. Cool card, especially for Commander, where you can kind of, politic things a little bit and let somebody draw a card so long as they don't attack you or something like that, and then bust up 2 artifacts or enchantments from completely different players, which I think is actually pretty cool. But even in standard, if you gift them the card, being able to blow up 2 things is actually kind of a huge deal, right? So I like this. I don't love the sorcery speed, I gotta admit, but still I like blowing up 2 things. But we also saw Kidnap and Parting Gust today with the gift mechanic. Kidnap is 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for an aura. It's an enchantment that enchants a creature, and you can gift a card in this case. Just like the last one, you can let them draw a card before anything happens with this card, while it's on the stack. Now, when it enters, you tap an enchanted creature that this goes on, and if the gift wasn't promised, you're going to put 3 stun counters on that creature, and then you control enchanted creature, which is pretty sweet. I hate that it taps the creature down no matter what. that's a little poopy doopy, but at the same time, you know, sometimes you'll just put the 3 stun counters on it and not care because it's kind of a removal spell, right? You get it off your opponent's side of the board. Maybe it does something for you other than attack or block, so you don't really care if it's tapped down, right? I just like a few things about this. I will always like a control magic every time I see it, even though control magics have not really seen much play in the last few years. We've had a few of them. The last one to see any real play was mass manipulation, like years ago at this point, so I'm not like super sure that this is going to see much play, but I'm always going to love control magic. And to be honest, I love the flavor on this too. That's pretty obvious. But I think Parting Gust is the best of the gift stuff we've seen so far today. It is 2 white mana for an instant. You can gift a fish. Gift a tapped fish. So instead of a card, they get a 1/1 blue fish creature token before anything else happens with this spell. Exile target non-token creature. Oh boy. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step.
Squirrel. Out of here! Now!
Or you do what exactly? Hit me with that fish.
So you can not promise to gift here and do a couple of things. You can either do something weird that your opponent can't attack with that guy, your opponent can't block with that guy, so you can just win the game on attacks or something. Or you can target your own stuff and blink it effectively, which is obviously something you want to do a good bit of the time with a lot of creatures in Standard that are actually worth playing. So cool stuff. But obviously, if you do end up giving them a fish, you target one of their guys, and it's exiled. 2 mana, instant speed, exile target non-token creature is actually just an extremely powerful line of text. Even if you're giving them a 1/1, kinda who cares? If you're getting rid of the most important creature in their deck, or even one of the most important creatures in their deck, you know, they're 3 or 4 drop. Yeah, I'll give you a fish so long as I exile that guy. Why does it say exile? I was so excited that like March of Otherworldly Light and Wandering Emperor were going to leave the format, and maybe Sunfall was going to be the only like played removal spell that actually exiles stuff. But I'm pretty sure this is going to see at least a little bit of play. It does leave a body on the table, but again, so I guess like a control mage is going to think, oh, okay, I'll get rid of your 4-drop, and yeah, you get a fish, but next turn when I Sunfall, that's an extra like power toughness for my incubator token I end up getting, right? So I don't know, dude. I think this is almost certainly destined to see some amount of play because it's cheap, it's instant speed, and exile is ridiculous. But we got one more mechanic to look at, and it's my favorite of the day, the cutest of the day. It's just another kicker mechanic. You know how every mechanic is just kicker with extra steps, and this one is unashamedly that, but it is a great version of it. Let's take a look at Flowerfoot Swordmaster so we can peep Offspring here. Not the band. It's a fine band. It's a mechanic, though, in this case. It's a single white mana for a 1/2 mouse soldier with Offspring 2. That means that you can kick 2 mana into this as you cast the spell. If you do, when this creature enters, create a 1/1 token copy of it. This particular thing also happens to have Valiant. That's 2 mechanics on the same card. So whenever this becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time every turn, mice you control get +1/+1, or +1/+0 rather, excuse me, until end of turn. So mice you control itself included. It's actually not a bad 1-drop. Sometimes it's not a bad 3-drop, because if you spend 3 mana and get 2 guys, you're actually kind of doing okay. And like both of those guys have a cool Valiant ability in case you care, like at all. I don't know, I do like this thing, but mostly I just like, again, the potential of an ability like Offspring to do completely broken stuff. If you want more Offspring stuff, and maybe you do, here's Tender Wild Guide, more mana dorks. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/2 Possum Druid. Let's go. With Offspring 2. So again, kick 2 mana into it, you get a 1/1 copy. This can tap for a mana of any color, or it can tap to put a +1/+1 counter on itself. So it can grow larger every single turn, which is pretty sweet. You can have one make mana and the other grow larger, or you can just make mana with both of them, which is probably what you end up doing if you actually kick mana into this. Being able to pay 4 mana and get 2 guys that both tap for mana is actually a pretty good Magic card. I'm almost convinced. Maybe it was a good Magic card 10 years ago and it's not anymore, but again, I think we're on the precipice of playability, and the mana dorks in this set are looking pretty good, by the way. By the way, fun fact before we get off this card, it is my wife's favorite new card from the set. She loves possums. There you go. But let's look at Warren Warleader as well as Thunder Trap Trainer up next. Now, Warleader is actually a pretty stout looking guy. 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 4/4 Rabbit Knight with Offspring 2. Whenever you attack, choose 1. create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token that's tapped and attacking. And or attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Now I say and or because if you offspring this, you can obviously just choose both, right? You choose one of each whenever you attack. And yeah, the offspring is a 1/1, so it's not going to be attacking very well, but it doesn't actually have to attack. It's just whenever you attack with anything. So like your war leader and its kid can stay out of combat and still proc twice during your combat step, which is really, really sweet. Guys you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. You choose that mode on both of those dudes. You're attacking with a 6/6 and a 3/3, and that costs you, 6 mana to get on the table in the first place. Even if you just pay the 4 and don't offspring the guy, he's pretty good. Again, he's like a Juzam Jin, right? He's kind of functionally a 4 mana 5/5 that boosts the rest of your team too, which is great. But, he just makes more rabbits if that's what you want. Guy does everything, It's kind of like, I like that they named him War Leader because he's kind of like a Leonin War Leader in some ways. Just a cool Magic card that I'm not sure really deserves the Mythic tag here, but might actually see some play if there aren't better white 4-drops. The problem is, there are, and we'll see another one later on in this video that I'm actually really excited about. But Thunder Trap Trainer, now the offspring cost on this might be twice as much as the other stuff we've looked at, but I still think it's probably the most powerful of all of these so far. This is 2 mana, it's 1 and a blue for a 1/2 Otter Wizard with offspring 4 in this case. When this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So, kind of a Wandering Mind. You remember that card? It's kind of a Wandering Mind, but it costs 2 mana, which I think makes a little bit of all of the difference in the entire world. Being able to cast this on turn 2 and get yourself a little 1/2 body for what that's worth, chump blocks or whatever, but also finds a removal spell, finds the sweeper, finds the important card you built your entire deck around, finds the reanimation spell, like whatever it is you might be looking for early in the game, plus a body, impulse kind of, plus a body, always really, really, really sweet. So even though you can't find like creatures with it, I just do not care. Finding again the planeswalker or the important sweep for later in the game, like all of this is a pretty important function. So yeah, being able to effectively cast this spell for 2 mana and get a body is a pretty big game. So, again, whether you get the offspring cost or not, it's a really good Magic card, but if you do get the offspring cost, yeah, you really don't get that much in terms of stats, but 2 bodies and 2 sort of impulses is ridiculous. Look at the top, basically 8 cards of your library and get 2 of the best ones. Like, yeah, I'd say that's pretty fantastic too. And I've been playing Magic for nearly 30 years, so I ought to know, but let's move on here to not mechanics, but sort of mechanics, because in case you couldn't tell by all the marketing and stuff, this is going to be a set where creature type matters more than just a little bit. And we saw a lot of cards that care about different creature types today. So I kind of want to go over some of those real quick, if you don't mind. That's why you're here. Castal, the Wind-Crested, that's a good one to start with. Why not? 5 mana, 3 a white and a blue for a 4/5 legendary Boyd Scout. It's got flying. Whenever 1 or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, choose one of these. Bullet point 1, you may put a bird creature card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Bullet point 2, put a +1/+1 counter on each Boyd you control. Or bullet point 3, draw a card. So it does say 1 or more, so you're only going to do one of these like every single turn. That's kind of lame. So I don't know how much I want to pay 5 mana for this, at least in standard, but even just by itself, it's a 5 mana 4/5 flyer, draw a card when it does combat damage. It could do a whole lot worse. It could grow itself whenever it does combat damage. That's okay, right? I guess shorten that clock. And of course, if you happen to have birds in your hand or graveyard, it's probably the most interesting mode on the card. Now, Phineas is also here. No word on Ferb yet, but Ace Archer over here is 2 mana, a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary rabbit archer with vigilance and reach. Whenever Phineas attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control that's a token or a rabbit. Then, if creatures you control have power 10 or greater, you get to draw a card. So all you got to do is get 8 more power than this guy. And it puts +1/+1 counters on each other creature that's a rabbit or a token. So I guess this might go in tokens decks. It might even be a halfway decent commander in tokens decks, but I imagine this is mostly a card in the 99, even if it makes that, because it's a 2/2, and sure, it's got 2 keyword abilities, but I'm not actually sure how much you're going to really be attacking with this. And if you are attacking, it's probably the early game, which means you probably don't have that many other rabbits or token guys. So I'm just not like super convinced that this card is good, I don't know if I want to give it that tag quite yet, but I do think it's a cool, well-designed card, and that's got to count for a lot. There was a point where just having like a 2-mana 2/2 with 2 keyword abilities would be enough to be like, okay, we're cooking, but it's actually pretty cold. One of my favorite cards of the day to care about creature types isn't even a creature. Imagine that. Is Cash Grab. Great name for a card, by the way. Nailed it. 2 mana, 1 and a green for an instant. Mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or return a squirrel card to your hand this way, create yourself a food token. So if you control a squirrel, you get to get like forage fodder, which is pretty sweet. But even if you don't control a squirrel, pretty good card, dude. It's like a grizzly salvage in some ways, or like a mulch, I guess, but the instant speed matters an awful lot on this, and milling 4 cards for that instant speed, 2 mana, relatively cheap, is sweet as well. So leaving 3 cards in your graveyard for forage, it's worth noting, but for plenty of other strategies in standard right now, from Reanimator to, everything else you can cast out of your yard and beyond, is actually pretty sweet at instant speed for just a couple of, manas. So not terrible. I really don't think this card is bad. And, for what it's worth, you get the best sort of like permanent card out of all of those. So again, I could just harp on this all day, but just not too bad. I forgot the joke I was going to do. I was going to be like, it's called Cash Grab. Wizards know something about that. Okay, I did the joke, so let's move on to the next card. And it's Clement, the Worry Wart. This is 3 mana, 1 a green and a blue for a 3/3 legendary frog druid with vigilance. Whenever Clement the Worry Wart or another creature you control enters, return up to 1 target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner's hand. Frogs you control have tap, add green or blue. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell. Well, it's not a May ability. You must, if you have one, you must return a creature with lesser mana value to your hand, or owner's hand, I guess. It might not be one of your guys that you currently have control of. You get what I'm saying? Anytime that another creature and this guy, ETBs, you are forced to bounce one of your own guys. That's a little weird. I don't love that so much. I do love the frog-specific tap. All your frogs can ramp now. That's actually sweet. This can ramp as well. But in terms of like Simic 3-drops that are completely broken, this is nowhere near the level of Oko or Nadu or the other ones. Euro. Man, really a lot of good, broken Simic 3-drops. This is almost certainly not one of them, and I'm sorry to report that, because the card is cool, and I'm sure there's plenty of fun commander stuff that you can do with it, right? Oh, I'll return this guy with an ETB trigger to my hand, and I'll do another cool thing, and it seems great, but I'm just not sure how well you're going to be able to line it up in standard, but I kind of hope I'm wrong. We also got to see Alania, Divergent Storm here. This is 5 mana, 3 a blue and a red for a 3/5 legendary otter wizard. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant, the first sorcery, or the first otter spell other than Alania you've cast this turn, you may have a target opponent draw a card. If you do, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copies. So you can get this to trigger up to 3 times a turn if you have an instant and a sorcery and an otter. You should probably cast the otter first and then the instant and the sorcery, because a lot of otters are going to care about casting instants and sorcery. Still, sweet little card here, man. I love that you can copy otters that you play. That's great. It works with Changeling pretty well. Love that too. So let's kind of go on this. I don't think that it's standard playable, but in terms of like fun, maybe commanders could be, I kind of like this a good bit. And even if you're not doing a thing with otters, just the ability to like copy your first instant or sorcerer every turn, yeah, that's pretty good too. But wait, we got some more creature type stuff to look at, because yeah, we got a bunch of stuff that cares about like a specific creature type, just one of them. But we also got a few cards that care about like all kinds of creature types, like a bunch of different ones all at once, which I really think is cool and a fun design space to explore. So let's take a look at Valley Quest Caller here. 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/3 rabbit warrior. Whenever one or more other rabbits, bats, birds, and or mice you control enter the battlefield, scry 1. Other rabbits, bats, birds, and mice you control get +1/+1. So I have to gripe slightly that this does not scry 1 when DTBs. But still, you have a 2 mana, 2/3 anthem effect for a bunch of different kinds of things here. And you get to scry whenever you play stuff. Like from now on, that's great. It's not even whenever you cast. It's whenever something enters the battlefield. So like if you have Offspring, you'll kind of get to scry 2. So long as, they fit the creature type for this thing. So love that. I love that with this, you can build a rabbits deck or a bats deck or a birds deck or a little bit of all of those, mice too, it's pretty sweet. So I like this like a whole lot, and I think that it's like super commander playable for what that's worth. But depending on like how good all these creature types are in standard, you might be able to put something together, you know, give your Deep Cavern Bat +1/+1, fly over for 2 lifelink. Like, we're kind of, again, like, we're cooking slightly. The burner is on with this guy. Now, a dude that I am not sure is as good as the last guy, but I kind of unashamedly like more, is Valley Rotcaller. 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 1/3 squirrel warlock with menace. When it attacks, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, X being the number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats that you control. Now, again, kind of a cop-out here. I do think it could count itself, you know, when it attacks, because it's just a 2 mana 1/3, and the menace is going to help it attack, like, safely, but it's not always going to attack safely, and it can be cut down. It can be bolted in this case. So I'm not sure that in the realm of like black 2-drops, it's going to be the best one we could possibly be playing. But, you know, you're going to be playing Deep Cavern Bat in your deck. Certainly, right? You might be playing 1 or 2 good squirrels or 1 or 2 rats. You know, you got Lord Skitter in your deck or something. Maybe you even have like Song of Totentants in your deck. So you can make like 10 rats and then swing with this guy and drain 10, which is a 20-point life swing. So, I don't know. I want to do some fun stuff with this. I think this is a really, really sweet attacks trigger. And in games where you can attack with him more than once, he's absolutely unbelievable. But I'm just not sure that's going to happen like too often. But I do really, really like this guy, even though he's likely a trap. Like, I'm trying to be honest with myself. I'm pretty sure this guy isn't actually very good, but I get to get a little hype about certain cards just because I like them. This is my YouTube channel, so I will do that on occasion. I'm doing it right now. I'm choosing that right now. But hey, everybody, you've made it about halfway through the video at this point. We've mostly been talking about creature type matters stuff and like new mechanics, and I'm pretty sure that you're getting ready to see to just see a really good card, or you're going to leave the video. I wouldn't blame you. I really wouldn't. There's like 50 cards today, and like half of them are just kind of cute and whatever. There are some good ones, though. We'll get to them soon. But matter of fact, why don't we just get to one of them now? Because I've got one more like creature type matters at all thing that I want to look at, but it's probably like one of the best cards, at least like in Commander, that's going to see play for the rest of time that we've seen in the set so far, which isn't saying much considering we've only seen like 1/6 of the set. But bear with me, and let's take a look at 3 Tree City right here on your screen. This, when it comes into play, you choose a creature type. It doesn't come into play tapped, which is kind of nice. It taps for a colorless mana, also sweet. But you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and choose a color. And then you add that color mana to your mana pool, equal to the number of creatures that you control that are of the type you chose when this entered the battlefield. So, pretty self-explanatory. If I name rabbits and I control 6 rabbits, then suddenly this will generate a net 3 mana when I use that activated ability. So, you know, kind of a coffers of sorts, but for creature types. Kind of a Nykthos of sorts, but for creature types. And that is stupidly good. But I think it's mostly going to be useful, again, like in Commander, you know, an environment where you got your elves deck. Oh my god, elves. Man, how much mana is this producing elves? But there's plenty of like creature-based, you know, typal decks or whatever in Commander where this could pretty easily generate a net like 6 mana, like without breaking a sweat. But as far as standard goes, I think that's especially like in a Sunfall format where we have a billion different other good sweepers. This gets a little less realistic, but you know, I still think that there's a case for it, depending on what you're playing, especially if you're in like a mono-colored creature type matters deck, and you can sneak this into your mana base a little bit more easily, then yeah, I kind of think there's no reason to not play some number of it. So maybe some standard play, maybe even some play in competitive formats farther back than that, depending on, you know, again, like what creature types matter in those formats, right? But I'm not saying it's going to rule Pioneer and Modern when it comes out, but you never know. Like, even the humans decks in those formats might want to jam in a copy of this if they're like mono-white humans, right? So, I don't know. Just a lot to love about this, but mostly, I'd pick up a copy if you can, because it's probably going to be worth something for Commander players until Magic cards don't exist anymore. So, forever. Now, we're going to get to the rares and mythics and stuff from today, like, really, really quick, but first, I want to look at like most of the cards from the day, right? I don't want to like screw you out of seeing Magic cards. So real quick, I want to look at some of the solid's a better word, commons and uncommons from the day. Now I'll start with pretty normal stuff like Shrike Force and Hop to It. Both great names for cards. Shrike Force is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 1/3 Bird Knight with flying, vigilance, and double strike. It's just cool to have 3 different pretty good abilities all on the same guy. And if you can throw an aura on him or some anthem effects like we've already seen, right? Like second turn, you throw down that guy that gives all your birds +1/+1. Third turn, this guy, you're rocking. I'm not sure you're rolling, but you're at least rocking. I don't mind this dude, I tend to love dudes who just have a bunch of keyword abilities. I'm a sucker for those, but probably not amazing, but Hop to It, I think might actually be a little bit better. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a sorcery. You get 3/1/1 white rabbit creature tokens. So kind of a spectral procession. Not quite as good most of the time as a spectral procession, but still, I'll take this in some cases. If I go like Regal Bunnycorn on turn 2 into this on turn 3, then my Bunnycorn gets like +3/+3, and I get a bunch of dudes on the table too, so sweet. If I go that dude on turn 2 we just looked at that gives all your rabbits +1/+1, and then I play this on 3, that's 6 power on 3 guys on turn 3. Like, these are actually pretty good lines, so I could see this seeing some amount of play just in tokens decks. 3 bodies for 3 mana is worth it some of the time. Let's also briefly look at Fireglass Mentor as well as Stormcatch Mentor and Ruthless Negotiation here. Now, the Fireglass Mentor is pretty cool, but I want him to be a little bit better than he actually is. This is a black and a red for a 2/1 Lizard Warlock. At the beginning of your second main phase, if an opponent lost life this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library and choose one of those. Until end of turn, you may play that card. Now again, got a nitpick. I wish it was until end of your next turn or whatever, but still, this is kind of neat. It reminds me a little bit of Florian, the vampire guy, but he costs 2 mana. And note that he doesn't have to deal any damage or anything like that. It's just if an opponent lost life, very likely to combat damage. Don't hate this dude. I really don't hate this dude, but again, this looks like one of those 2007 maybe he would have seen play, and in 2024 he's just and not as good as he once would have been, but he's still a cool little card and probably halfway decent limited. But Stormcatch Mentor, speaking of mentors, also there sure are a lot of mentors in this set. I think they're all supposed to be signposty, uncommons, and limited, but geez, we seen 4 of them already. Anyway, this is 2 mana, a blue and a red for a 1/1 otter wizard with haste and prowess, and instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So a bunch of sweet lines of text, man. 2 mana to Goblin Electromancer, right? It's literally Goblin Electromancer's text. Is pretty good. We've seen that that's a pretty good card in Magic history before, but to put haste and prowess on your Goblin Electromancer, and I guess subtract the PT, but who cares, is great. That's really, really good. So I like this guy, kind of a whole lot, and I'm not sure that he ends up seeing too much standard play, but I gotta give some props for haste and prowess. He comes down on turn 3, Monstrous Rage. He's actually a respectable power toughness the turn he comes down, and yeah, man, you play him on turn 3 and you can play another 2-cost spell, like a Lightning Strike, and get in for 2 with him. There's a lot of good things about this dude. Now, I'm not sure that Ruthless Negotiation is better than Stormcatch Mentor, but I like it a lot, and the art is sick, so let's take a look at it. It's a single black mana for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles a card from their hand. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, draw a card. You can flash it back for 4 and a black. So, hey, I guess Flashback making an appearance in this set. I'm not sure how many cards it's going to be on. It might just be this one. They do that, but still, yeah, I kind of love this. The first time you cast it, it's not amazing, but you are exiling the card, and I think that's a huge difference from cards like Hopeless Nightmare and stuff that's kind of similar to this. Now, Hopeless Nightmare can be sacrificed either to its own ability or something else, like a Braids. It can be brought back to your hand with a Pixie Guide or whatever it's called. So there's a bunch of fun tricks with Hopeless Nightmare that aren't available with this. But honestly, the ability to late in the game, make them exile one of the only couple of cards they have left in their hand and you draw a card, that's actually kind of very good. Even if it does cost 5 mana, it gives you something to do late in the game, card to play out of your yard. So when you play this, it's kind of like you still have a card in your hand. So I don't know. I just really kind of like this and I can't help myself. Hey, we're back. It's my face again. Let's look at some rares and mythics. That's the best cards, right? Not always, but in this case, there's some pretty good ones. Am I shiny yet, by the way? It's really freaking hot in this office. Unbelievably hot. It's 103 degrees outside where I live. It's probably slightly more than that inside this room. So Let's look at more Magic cards. Starting with the first rare of the day. It's, well, technically not, but the first rare of the day that doesn't fit any of the categories we've already been through. Let's take a look at Artist Talent up next. Yet another class. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. You can put 2 and a red into this to get to level 2 at sorcery speed. Non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And if you want to bump it to level 3, you got to pay another 3 mana, 2 and a red. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, you get 2 extra damage instead. So, pretty sweet. You lightning bolt something, you get 5 damage. Okay, if I cast Shock, I get 4 damage, but I guess the problem with that is that it took an investment of 8 mana to get to that point, which is in all its sorcery speed too, which is not necessarily where I want to be. Do I want to pay 5 mana to get non-creature spells I cast cost 1 less to cast? Do I want to pump 5? Does that mean I have to cast 6 non-creature spells to pay for the fact that I cast a spell in the first place? Really 5? I'm not a huge fan of this, although I do like the sort of static mode on it. Cast a non-creature spell, Rummage. We're kind of getting there just a little bit. I don't hate that. But all that said, I'm still not really seeing this scene play most places. But I want to be wrong, like maybe this fuels reanimation or something like that. But we'll see. Ultimately, I hope that Artist Talent isn't useless, but I gotta say, I know a few people in my real actual life with art degrees, and I'm not going to finish that sentence. Let's move on to Glarb next. That's right, his name is Glarb. He's Calamity's Augur up next. You got to kind of sound like you're burping or hiccuping when you say his name. Glarb is 3 mana. Soul-type colors, a black, a green, and a blue for a 2/4 legendary frog wizard noble with death touch. You may look at the top card of your library anytime you feel like it. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. And you can tap it to surveil 2. You may be asking what lands are going to have mana value 4 or greater. I say read the card again. I dare say this is actually pretty good. You're kind of a courser of Krufix that can also cast big boys off the top of your library. And not just big boys, it's just spells. Yeah, cast spells, mana value 4 or greater from the top. And like the tap to surveil is sweet. I guess that's not bad. It's going to be really, really hard to swing into the guy too. A 4 toughness death touch thing is going to take on most things, like all the way into the mid game. I was going to say early, but all the way to the mid game. So just a 2/4 uncut downable death touch on the 3rd turn of the game that you do have to pay soul tie colors for. So you do have to do some work, right? But still, I think this is like more than worth it. Like most of the time to get old Glarb on your side of the table, because God, I've had a frog in my throat there. Sorry, but still, yeah, just based on stats alone, awesome. And you're going to get the occasional land drop off the top of your library. And you're going to get the occasional amazing card off the top of your library, which is even better. Now, let's start looking at a cycle of mythics up next. They're probably all amazing, right? Well, hold on. Let's look at Season of the Bold first. It's the red one. It's a red sorcery for 5 mana. That means it's a joke. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a Sork. Up to 5. You get to choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. So just look at this like energy, okay? Let's just do that for me. Let's just say that you get 5 energy when you cast this spell to use on just this spell. So for 1 paw print, it costs you 1 paw print. I feel ridiculous. To create a tapped treasure token. It costs you 2 paw prints to exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. It costs you 3 paw prints until the end of your next turn. Whenever you cast a spell, Season of the Bold deals 2 damage to up to 1 target creature. So just for clarification, you can choose the same mode multiple times. It says that right there on the card, but I'm just making sure that you caught that and you read it. And we're up to speed here, because you can pay 5 mana to create 5 treasure tokens, which I think might be the actual best way to use this card. But you can also kind of draw 4 cards you can play till your next turn and get a treasure token, which is sweet. You can get 2 treasures and do the 3rd thing, which is also kind of nice, because you can just like hit creatures whenever you cast spells. So like you play with fire, and that's worth 4 damage. That's cool. So there's a lot of ways to use this card, but I'm not sure that any of them are great. I guess if you're playing an Atraxa deck, okay? I guess if you want to be like a little stinker and you want to play Atraxa the turn after you play this, you can just like create 3 treasure tokens with it, and also exile the top 2 of if you're looking for the Atraxa. Am I talking myself into this card? Like a little bit, yes. So let's move on before I sound dumber. Season of Weaving is 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for a Sork. Choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. You can choose the same mode more than once. For 1 paw print, you can draw a card. For 2 paw prints, you choose an artifact or creature you control and then create a token. That's a copy of it. Okay. For 3 paw prints, you return each non-land, a non-token permanent, to its owner's hand. So like an upheaval thing, Cyclonic Rift kind of, for 3 paw prints. So is this worth 6 mana at sorcery speed? Probably not. Like maybe if you're casting it for free with like a Conspiracy Unraveler or something like that, like maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because when you actually resolve this spell, I think that it's super, super good. Like, return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand, and either create a token that's a copy of a thing you have, or draw 2, Cyclonic Rift kind of, and draw 2. That is very good, I think. So you might have to discard some cards depending on how many permanents you have, but I still think that's pretty good. So I do like this card mostly for commander play. And of course, if you can find a way to cheat it in like standard or pioneer or something, again, like we're having a conversation, but just on its face, I'm not sure how much card or play the card really sees. But again, I just want to point out that once the card resolves, it is somewhat likely to have this massive effect on the game, so you can't really keep it out. But my favorite of the seasons that we've seen so far is Season of Loss. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a sorcery. Choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You can do the same one more than once. For 1 paw print, each player sacks a creature. Let's kind of go. Just that alone, pay 5 paw prints, make them sack all their guys. Okay. For 2 paw prints, draw a card for each creature you controlled that died this turn. For 3 paw prints, each opponent loses X life, where, check this out, X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So many ways to use this card. Like in a self-mill deck with a ton of creatures, and there's a few of those right now in standard. This is just a kill spell. This is just a win condition in some ways, because, yeah, you can 20 your opponent with this. Like, and I'm not going to say it's not hard, but it's also easier than you might think. But even if you just want to like 7 your opponent with this, deal 7, 8, 9 damage to them, I feel like that's like fairly easy. Like, it's not gonna be that hard. But obviously there's a bunch of other ways. You can just use this as a sweeper that like does have some parity to it, but like who cares? Obviously, if you don't have like any creatures and your opponent does, this is just a straight up sweep that could also potentially do like other stuff if you do have dudes in your yard or whatever. But even if it's just like each player sacks 3 creatures and then you also draw a card for each dude you control. So like everybody sacks 3 creatures and then you draw 2 or 3 cards. Great. For 5 mana, it's so good. So like, I really like this thing a good bunch, and there might be a couple of standard decks that can withstand sack 5 guys, like Boros Convoke right now might be able to do that, but for the most part, most creature-based decks are going to be completely destroyed by this card, and you might even get a card or 2 in the meantime. Like, geez, even if you're not playing creatures in your deck, you just like tapped your Mirex a couple of times to get mites, like, yes, everybody sack 4 guys or 5 guys. Yeah, everybody sack 3 guys, and I'll draw like 2 cards because I sacked a mite or 2. Is also a good mode. So I don't know, man. Deadly Cover-Up might be the better black sweeper, but this one has so many cool modes on it. And again, one of them is just straight up kill your opponent, and I'm down for that. But I'll move on to Dream Dew Entrancer, one of the newer cards of the day as I record this. This is 4 mana, 2 a green and a blue for a 3/4 Frog Wizard with reach. When it enters, tap up to 1 target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If you control that creature, draw 2 cards. Okay, so again, modality is the key. Like, all these cards have so many different ways you can use it. You can tap this guy down and draw 2. Yeah, it's a lot of stun counters, but if you need the cards that bad and you don't have any other creatures, that is a mode you can employ. If you want to, it can just be like an Offspring 1/1 or something, or just some random token you tap down, draw 2. Excellent. But this is also a 4 mana 3/4. Take your dude out of the game for like 3 or 4 turns, man. Like, effectively. That's really good too. So again, I kind of like everything this card does. And I think that, again, it might be slightly not good enough for real standard play, especially at this mana cost with these stats. I'm just not sure that it's quite there. But again, man, some card draw maybe, some take your dude out of the game maybe. There's a lot of good things about this card, and I think that it's especially good in the limited environment, which is why it's rare. If you don't want to get a million copies of this, it's really, really good there. But it might be able to make the jump, the hop over to standard, whatever, if conditions are just right. But let's be honest, they're probably not. So I'll move on to Ral, Crackling Wit. He's an otter. If you're a person and you come to Bloomburrow, you become a cute little animal, man. So he's an otter in this case. He costs 4 mana, 2 a blue and a red for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. He's still legendary planeswalker Ral. Nothing odder about his type, which I think I find a little odder than it needs to be. But anyway, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on Ral. That is a busted line of text. I just want to throw that out here right now. That is a good line of text. +1. Create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. -3. Draw 3 cards and then discard 2 cards. -10. Draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with instant and sorcery spells you cast have. Get ready for it. I don't know if you're ready for this. Storm. Instant and sorcery spells you cast have Storm in standard. Now, it is 10 to... It's -10 to Ultimate Ral, so... That's really, really hard. And if you can -10 a Planeswalker, I think you deserve to win the game. And that's probably what giving all your instants and sorcery Storm does, right? So I will say, though, maybe it's easier to get this to 10 than I think. Because, again, that passive is very, very good. The turn that you play this, if you can play even 1 instant or sorcery afterwards, then it's pretty easy to get him to like 6 loyalty. You know, as far as that +1, it's just Jaya's +1. It's like literally the exact same. A 4 loyalty play or a 4 mana planeswalker that you can +1 to get a 1/1 with prowess. And Jaya saw like literally no play, and you know, so I'm not like super excited about that, but I do kind of like the draw 3, discard 2. I think that's a good mode to have on a Magic card, especially, again, if you're looking to do reanimation stuff. Drawing 3 cards, just a fistful of cards, too. So casting Brainstorm almost, I think is sweet. So a lot of cool things about this Planeswalker. I think that he might be able to crack standard play. I guess I didn't mean for that to be a pun, but he is Crackling Wit. But yeah, he might be able to crack standard play a little bit, mostly because that passive is great, and he protects himself like somewhat well, you know. If you need to draw the sweeper, he can help you do that. If you need to make blockers, he can help you do that. And honestly, even if you are going to get attacked into, he can give himself loyalty just by casting spells. You cast a removal spell, that's one of the creatures that's attacking him gone, and helping negate the damage from another creature that's attacking him. So I think he stays alive pretty easily too. He might be a very, very good Planeswalker. Up next, my favorite creature overall of the day, and one of my favorite creatures in a really long time, but maybe not the best of the day. I think there's still one more besides this. It's Maha. It's Feathers Knight. This has actually been my desktop background for the last few months without even knowing what the card actually does. I just really like this art that we've had for a couple of months now. But once we actually learn what the card does, I got even more excited. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 6/5 legendary elemental bird with Flample and Ward discard a card. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. Nothing on the power, but base toughness 1. So good, man. I'm not sure this is better than Aclazotz. If we're looking for 5-drop black creatures that can actually see play in standard, I think Aclazotz has more going for it because it's resistant to removal spells and it makes them discard. And I guess this does too, but still. I don't know if this really stands that much of a chance of seeing too much play in a standard where Aclazotz is a playable Magic card, and even that only sees 1 or 2 of play in the decks it goes in. So I'm trying to be realistic about the actual playability of the card, but at the same time, 6/5 Flample that is basically never going to be profitably blocked because all of your opponent's dudes have base toughness 1, so they throw, 5 flyers in front of it to make sure it doesn't do combat damage to them, maybe? That seems good. But yeah, if they ever want to get rid of it, they have to get rid of a card, which we know because of Graveyard Trespasser is actually a really, really good ward ability. So I like a lot about this. It's also likely to come down a little bit later in the game where they don't have, they have like one removal spell and nothing else in their hand. And they feel really smug about having that removal spell, but they don't have anything else to pitch, to be able to kill this dude. So I like a lot about this. I think it's a really simple design, and I tend to like that too, especially when it's a simple design that we've never seen really anything like before, at least all of these abilities collected on one Magic card. Very, very unique line of text that will be pretty important in Commander, almost certainly, if nothing else, but I do think this is a very real shot in Standard. Yirga, Eater of All. Igra? It's probably Igra, Eater of All. It's a pretty impressive Magic card, too. This is 5 mana, 3 a black and a green for a 6/6 legendary elemental cat. Ward, Sacrifice of Food. Normally, that would be a chilling line of text that's basically equal to hexproof, but there's more text on the card. Other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have 2 taps, sack this permanent, you gain 3 life. Whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Igra, Eater of All. Remember that all tokens touch the graveyard, right? So like treasure tokens touch the graveyard, food tokens touch the graveyard, clue tokens touch the graveyard. And again, what we're really looking for in terms of relevance here is food tokens. Obviously, if all creatures are food, then it is much, much easier to kill this guy than it initially looks. But first of all, your opponent has to have creatures to sack in the first place, and they won't always have creatures to sacrifice. You're playing against control or something. It's not a given that they have bodies. But if they do have bodies, they still have to sack a body to kill this guy, even if they're coming down on like a 1/1 token or something. They still have to have removal spell in hand, the mana to cast it, and come down on board presence to do it. So if they're going to shoot down some of your board presence, they have to be willing to come down on theirs too. I think that's a great little ward cost. But obviously, you popping food, your opponent popping food, all of that, Igra gets even larger, and it's already a 5 mana 6/6, So I think this is a really, really cool Magic card. It's going to make for either a great commander or a great addition to already extant, black-green food decks in that environment. But it's incredible in those decks. And again, I think it's amazing as the commander in black-green food right now. But even in Standard, man, even in Standard, I will say that, it costs 5 mana for a creature with no keyword abilities other than the ward, obviously. But this does more than enough and has global effects on the entire table. I think it might actually be worth at least dropping into a Golgari deck early in the format to see what it does. Again, maybe you play Maha instead. Maybe you play Aklazats instead, if you're looking for other 5-drops. Maybe you even play that new Gitrog monster instead. But again, I think this is more than annoying enough to warrant at least tryouts. But final big mythic card of the day, and I do think this is easily one of the best cards of the day. I'm going to do some praising on it here. This is Basa, the Bounding Spring. It shows up, I believe, at the end of the Bloomburrow trailer. So better be pretty good, and it is. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 4/5 legendary elemental elk. When it enters, create a treasure token if an opponent controls more lands than you. You gain 4 life, and if an opponent has more life than you. Create 2 1/1 blue fish creature tokens if an opponent controls more creatures than you. Draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. So, if I'm up against aggro, this is probably going to make 2 creatures and gain 4 life. If I'm against aggro, it is extremely easy, I just want to repeat this, for this 4 mana to net me 6 power worth of stats across 3 bodies and 4 life. That's a really good Magic card. That is so good. If I'm playing against ramp, I get a 4 mana 4/5 that makes a treasure token, which is probably halfway decent. If I'm playing against, controller mid-range and they have a bunch of cards in their hand, my 4 mana 4/5 draws me a card, if not more. My 4 mana 4/5 might draw me a card and make a treasure token. Almost no matter what this does, it's pretty good, unless it literally does nothing, and there is a chance that it literally does nothing. But I think in most games of Magic, it's going to do one or more of these things for you. And again, especially in that aggro matchup, the card is ridiculous. We saw some great Magic cards today on our first day, but this is almost certainly, if not in the top 3, then in the top 5. I think what we're looking at right here is a card that's going to be important in Standard for the next 3 years. That's basically all I got for this one, man. Just hope you had a good first day. Keep coming around. Make sure you sub to the channel if you haven't done it yet, so you can get all the spoiler videos for this entire preview season. And do the other YouTube stuff on your way out. Real quick, I got a make sure you guys know about this because nobody knows about it. I've actually decided to start doing a thing where I hit random on Scryfall 10 times a day and just review those 10 cards and put out a video every single day. But I'm not doing it on this channel because I don't want to jam your subscription feed up or your recommended feed up with 2 videos a day basically during spoiler season. You'd start seeing me a lot. You'd unsubscribe. You get sick of me. Oh, I just don't want to like clog up the channel with a bunch of videos. So I've put those videos where I rate the 10 random cards over there on my like personal channel. I'll leave a link in the description to the first 2 of those. Make sure you subscribe to that channel and check out those videos if you feel like it. But aside from that, how I really kind of survive around here is Patreon. All I really ask is $1 a month, but there are other options. But for that $1 a month, you can vote on what decks we actually end up doing once Bloomburrow Deck Techs season comes around and what other videos we do too. So $1 a month buys you a little bit, and to be honest, I'm just kind of worth $1 a month in support every month, and I kind of know that. I think I know that I'm worth at least $1. But anyway, if you're considering doing that, I really appreciate it. And if you're already a patron, geez Louise, I could not survive without you. So appreciate you. You have basically brought YouTube this preview season, and I'm sure that YouTube appreciates it. But anyway, I'm done with all the intros and outros. That's Allski Kowalski. Let me know how you're feeling about Bloomburrow so far down there in the comments section, and I will catch you cats later. I am Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.